How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Beis. Oh, wow. Now that's interesting. So Lamed Beis, of course, is Leib, the heart. And you know what we talk about on Daf Lamed Beis? Very briefly, but among other things that we discuss, the Oris Levuvin, hides that they stuck their hand into the animal and ripped out the heart while it was still alive. Exciting times. But Levuvin, the heart. We are discussing the heart. But the main discussions, though, are actually not that. The first main discussion is about the Cheres Hadriani, if I think that's what it was called, which is the Hadrianic shards of pottery, which basically they, like the Roman soldiers would take, basically it was like pottery that would absorb wine. We're going to learn about it. And you could basically take around shards of pottery that you could just like soak in water and the wine is released. Interesting concept. Basically, we're just moving on in the Mishnah, so just a little shtiklach. So we have the Cheres Hadriani, we have those hides that they ripped the heart out of. We have like some Avodah Zarah stuff, like meat for Avodah Zarah, and then people on their way to like fairs and festivals and things. Just moving on in the Mishnah to the different items that were there. Okay, we are going to start on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, 3 lines into the Omid on Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. The Cheres Hadriani, Hadrianic potter. My Hadriani, what's this Hadrianic pottery? Amar Yehuda Mishmuel. Cheres shel Hadrianus Kaiser. The pottery of Hadrian the Caesar. Kios Rivdimi Omar, when Rivdimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said, Karke besula oisa shelai of the Adam mei olam. That I guess Hadrian found virgin land that had never ever been worked, and therefore the product that it produced was very stark, very solid. All the potential that had been waiting and stored up in that land for who knows how long, it all went into that fruit, into those grapes, into that vineyard that was planted there. Vinata, and he worked the field, planted a vineyard. Viramiloi lechamra begufe chivari, and put the wine that was produced from this land and from these very stark vines, he put into new pottery. Umaitzilu lechamrayu, and the new pottery was very absorbent, and it absorbed this very strong wine into the earthenware. Umazbrulu, and then they broke the earthenware into shards. Bechaspe, I think into like shards and stuff. And vidaru ba'adayu, and the soldiers would take it with them on their military expeditions, and wherever they arrived, tarulu, they would soak the shards, the wine saturated shards, vishasu, and they would have wine to drink. And it's an interesting innovation there by the Romans, that they basically had these earthenware vessels that absorbed very strong wine, that they were then later able to just soak the shards of pottery in order to get fashnikit. Very interesting. Amr Yoshua Malevi Virishin Shalanu Kishlishi Shalan, and not and to take this wine seriously, that our Rishon, our top shelf wine, is as good as their wine from the shards after they've already been soaked 3 times. The wine produced after soaking these Hadrianic shards 3 times is better than our top shelf wine. So, I guess, I imagine that means it's better than Manischewitz. Wow. Must be really good. Okie dokie. Fine. All right. So that was the Hadrianic wine. Very nice. Kasha. Ma'u lismoich boen kare hamito. See, okay. So now this is the shaila that we're going to be working with for the next little chunk. Oh, this is the shaila. Who can explain this? Who can explain this to me? So the shaila is, you have these shards of earthenware, okay? Now, what's unique about these shards, obviously, is that they're saturated with wine, and that they can be used to get fashniket, that you know, as wine, right? You soak the shards, you get wine. What if? So now, we listed these Hadrianic, shards as on the list of things that you can't get any hanoya from them. The shaila is, can you get hanoah from them if you're going to use it for something else, not for the wine? Right? The wine is aser because, you know, it's a nesach or whatever. But what if you just want the sharded pottery because you want to put it under your bed? It's like, yeah, you want the shard, and the shard is saturated with wine, but you don't want it for the wine. You want it just because you want a shard to put under your bed. Can you get benefit in that way? I understand for sure the Mishnah is saying you can't get benefit from it as wine, but what about as a shard of pottery for its, what's the word I'm thinking of? Utilitarian, maybe, use. So that's the shaila. That's the shaila. I wonder if this light is a bit bright. Do I have? Yeah. Let's see what happens if I'm experimenting with different lighting setups and things like that. So yeah, the light was just for a long time I wasn't using the light when I was recording, but I'm trying to experiment with different things now. So I have this light, but it's very strong. So I thought maybe if I put on shades, it would make it easier. And so we'll try it out. We'll see. We're trying different things. So now, so what was the shaila? So the shaila was, so can you use these shards of pottery to put under your bed? So you don't want it for the wine, you just want it for its utilitarian purpose to put under your bed. That's the shaila. Again, that's a kasha. Can you use these Hadrianic shards that are saturated with wine, but not for wine, but just to put under your beds, I guess to even out the bed so that it's balanced? So if you want the existence of these shards, and I guess technically the wine in the shards, but really not, but again, I did davar aher. You really don't need it for the wine, but you really just want it to be able to put under your bed. So Tashma, classic, nice, clean machlokas. One opinion is osir, one opinion is muter meisvei. We have a contradiction. Hadardurin varukbaos. Let's see if I can remember what these are. Jars and one of them was jars, and the other one was come on. Jars and dag nabbit. What was the other thing? All right, we gotta look it up. I knew I was gonna forget. Jars and lamed bays. Yeah, okay. Jars and, come on, here we go. Jars and bottles. Exciting times. Jars and bottles. Okay, very good. Jars and bottles. So what about jars and bottles? So these are made of hide. Okay. So dardurin varukbos. These jars and these bottles that are made of hide, shalovde kochavim, and they belong to idolaters. Yain Yisrael konus bis bohen, and you have the wine of a yid in these jars, these hide jars and bottles. Also b'shtiru muter bano. Okay, it is forbidden to drink them, but it is muter to get hanoah from them. Okay, that if you remember, that's like the chachamim in the Mishnah. If we flip back to the Mishnah daf chavtes omid beis, right? So we had said over there, I'm just going to read quickly from the Mishnah and chavtes omid beis. Know this ha'ovei kochavim, that the hide flasks of the kucham, the kankanin, and their jugs, which are earthenware. You have the wine of a yid inside these containers. Asurin ve'isurin isur anoya divrei Meir. So Meir says they're asur ba'anoya, asur ba'anoah. V'chacham omrim ein asurin, ein isurin isur anoah. Whereas the chacham say they're mutter ba'anoah, but you can't drink them. Okay, so now, and that's what we're saying here. So again, Meisvei hadardurin varukbos, the jars and the bottles, these hide jars and bottles of the chum that belong to of the chum, yain shesu akonus boyan, and you have the wine of a yid in these receptacles. Also bishtir, you're not allowed to drink it, but umutter ba'ano. Okay, now here's where it, actually not yet. No, so Shimon ben Guda, hey Shimon ben Guda, lifnei beno, Rabban Gamliel. Oh, so Shimon ben Guda testified before the son of Rabban Gamliel. Before the son of Rabban Gamliel. The shaila is, which son was it? Tosfos suggests that maybe it was Rab Chanina ben Gamliel. But anyways, Rabban Gamliel, so Rab Shimon ben Guda testified to the son of Rabban Gamliel about his father, Rabban Gamliel, sheshasa mimenu ba'ako. That Pashit, there was a hide, one of these hide vessels, one of these hide, jars, jugs, whatever these were, jars and bottles. So in the Mishnah we had seen, the opinion of Reb Meir says you can't even get anah from it. The Chacham say you can get anah, but you can't drink it. Rabban Gamliel even drank from it. But the other rabbis who were there were not okay. They were not cool with that. Remember, this is a hide jar or bottle that belonged to an oved kochavim, meaning that was used by an oved kochavim to store wine. And Rabban Gamliel drank, kosher wine, but from those receptacles, those hide receptacles. So he drank from them, but the others there did not. They were not on board. Now here's the part that's relevant for us. Notice shel ovdei kochavim, flasks of ovdei kochavim. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel omer mishum Reb Yeshua ben Kfusai. Says Reb Shimon ben Gamliel from Reb Yeshua ben Kfusai. Aser lasos meyen shtichen lechamar. Oh, you hear this? You hear this? That if you have this flask of hide that was used to store the wine of an oved kochavim, you may not make it into a saddle for a donkey. V'ahacha the Rotzeh b'kuma yiday davar aher. So here we have a scenario where you have this hide flask, and you don't want the hide flask for itself for any reason. You don't need the wine. But you want to use the hide to make a saddle for your donkey, and we're saying no. So here's a scenario where you want this flask from the oved kochavim, but not as a flask and nothing to do with wine. You want it for a saddle, and we're saying it's aser. So what does this show, mistama? Mistama, what it shows is that Rotzeh b'kiyum yiday aher, aser. Oh, gewaldig. But the Rotzeh b'kiyum yiday davar acher v'katani the aser, and we're saying that it is forbidden. But the Gemara fires back, meh. That is not a proof that Rotzeh b'kiyum yiday davar acher is also with a taimech. But according to that logic, that you're saying that, well, we can't use these flasks to make saddles because it's Rotzeh b'kiyum yiday davar acher, and that's also, but the taimech kankanim shel ovdei kochavim litzru lemizabed. But if that's the case, then we shouldn't be allowed to purchase earthenware flasks from ovdei kochavim. But it seems that that's not a problem, and that we can purchase earthenware flasks, earthenware jugs, vessels that were used for wine, so long as we use it for something else. So if we say that Rotzeh b'kiyuman yiday davar acher is aser, well then it should apply to earthenware vessels as well, right? If we're saying that, well, these flasks, these hide flasks, cannot be used to make saddles because Rotzeh b'kiyuman yiday davar acher is aser, but if that's the case, then we shouldn't be allowed to buy these earthenware jugs wine jugs, but we'll use them for some other purpose. That shouldn't be allowed, right? We said mishna, no, this is mishna kankanim. What difference should there be whether we're talking about hide flasks or earthenware jugs? If we say Rotzeh b'kiyuman yiday davar acher is aser, it should be aser across the board. Rather, says Rava, the reason for the saddle and using the reason why we can't use the hide flasks for the saddle is because it's nothing to do with Rotzeh b'kiyuman yiday davar acher. Rather, Rava gzeira sham yibaka nodo v'yitlenu v'yisprenu al gabe nodo. It's a completely separate concern, which is that, well, if he uses the hide flask to make a saddle, what happens if his own actual flask then gets a hole in it or cracks or splits or something and needs to patch it up? He might take from his saddle in order to patch up his flask, in which case he'll be patching up his flask with part of a non-kosher wine flask, and that can create issues. So it has nothing to do with Rotzeh b'kiyuman yiday davar acher. It has to just do with a practical concern about preventing a scenario where he might end up using the non-kosher flask for his flask and getting benefit from the non-kosher wine that was absorbed in the flask. So it's a completely separate concern, nothing to do with Rotzeh b'kiyuman yiday davar acher aser. But now, fragdi gemara l'manda amar Rotzeh b'kiyuman yiday davar acher aser. Now, according to the opinion who does say that Rotzeh b'kiyuman yiday davar acher is aser, well then mishna kankanim disharu. Right? We're saying that we buy these earthenware vessels and we use them for other purposes. We can't use these earthenware vessels that were used for non-kosher wine. We can't use it for wine, but we can use it for other things. But if you say Rotzeh b'kiyuman yiday davar acher is aser, why can you do that? Why can you use it for other things? So, and for the Gemara, so Omar loch, they will respond, Hosam leise leisur be'enei, hoch leise leisur be'enei. There is a difference between Hadrianic shards and earthenware vessels that were used for wine. What's the difference? The difference is that these Hadrianic shards were saturated through and through with wine. We had said earlier that even if you soak them 3 times, the wine that was produced after the 3rd soak was still better than our top shelf wine. It was just solidified wine, basically. So therefore, that is what. So if you hold that Rotzeh b'kiyuman yiday davar acher is aser, when it comes to something like Hadrianic wine, which is like mamish wine in solid form. However, when it comes to a jug that a little bit of wine may have been absorbed into it, we won't necessarily say Rotzeh b'kiyuman yiday davar acher is aser there, and that explains why people purchase those jugs to use for different purposes. All right, fine. Now we had said that Shimon ben Guda had testified, this was earlier, about 10 lines ago, that Shimon ben Guda had testified before the son of Rabbi Gamliel that his father had drinked, that his father had drinked from a hide, what was it, a flask? Or was it, I think maybe it was one of those hide, whatever, this hide container. That Rabbi Gamliel had drinked from this hide container, and the rest of the rabbis did not agree with that course of action. So now, right, so again, the other rabbis did not agree with that course of action. But we have a contradiction. Birukbaus Shavde Kochavim, that wine that comes in these jars, these hide jars from Lovde Kochavim, Osir Bishtiyo Mutubano, you're not allowed to drink it, but you can get enough of it, like we said earlier, and like is the opinion of the rabbis. Heyed Shimon ben Godeya. Okay, so before we had said Shimon ben Guda, here we're saying Shimon ben Godeya, Lifnei B'no Rabban Gamliel, before the son of Rabban Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel, about his father Rabban Gamliel, Sheshasa Mimenu Be'ako, that in Acre, his father drank from one of these vessels, one of these hide vessels. V'hodula, and they admitted, they were on board with it. So the first Bryce had said that they were v'lo, they weren't on board. But now we're saying the opposite. V'hodula, they were on board. So, and for the Gemara, my lo hodulo, the ka'amar awesome. What does it mean when they said v'lo hodulo earlier? Kol siyaso aval beno modi le. Okay, so one way to answer it is that, well, first when we said v'lo hodulo, that they did, that was the other rabbis who were there. They were not on board. However, who did agree? Well, when, who is this? Reb Shimon ben Guda, or in this case, Reb Shimon ben Godeya, we'll get to that in a second, testified before Rabban Gamliel's son. Rabban Gamliel's son was on board. So v'lo hodulo really is really betzim v'lo hoda lo, and it's referring to Rabban Gamliel's son. He was on board with his father. V'baisema, alternatively, Guda l'chud v'Godeya l'chud, or it's just the first brisa was Reb Shimon ben Guda, and the second brisa, that was the first brisa, and the second brisa was Reb Shimon ben Godeya, that they are simply two different people. So it's not sort of the same, So one scenario happened with Reb Shimon ben Guda, and then a subsequent time it happened with Reb Shimon ben Godeya, and different people admitted to different things in the different events that were witnessed. Va'oras levuvin. As I mentioned earlier, and as we learned in the Mishnah the other day, oris levuvin. These hides of animals that conspicuously, right by the heart of the hide, there's a slit. And that slit is where a pagan reached his hand while the animal was still alive. He reached his hand into the insides of the animal and ripped out its heart. Sheesh. That, I would say that is not very dirachea darchei noam. That is a different kind of a thing. Sheesh. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ezu or levuv, what is, this hide that we're talking about with the heart missing? Kol shekarua keneged halev, if there's a slit by where the heart, would have been, v'kader kimin aruba, and it is pierced like a window through a heart, through which a heart could have been ripped out from, extracted via. Ish olav koret dam, osir, ein olav koret dam mutus. Now the Gemara says, now it depends. If there's like smatterings of blood there, osir, because why is, there's a slit there where the heart was with smatterings of blood around it. That heart was probably extracted through that slit. In olav koret dam, mutter. But if there are no smatterings of blood there, well, then it's mutter because, I don't know why there's a slit there, but, okay, the heart was not extracted through the slit, because if it was, then there would have been smatterings of blood there. So if there's no smatterings of blood, so then it is permitted. It is not osur bano. Amar Rav Huna says, Rav Huna lo shanu ela sheloi milchom. But now this, sort of drawing to this distinction, whether there is blood there or not, that is only relevant if the hide has not yet been salted. But once the hide has been salted, well then we're no longer looking for blood, if there's blood spots, then it's also, if there's no blood spots, it's mutter, because even if there were blood spots, we assume that when the hide was salted, those blood spots would have disappeared. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Says Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Bizman she'akera shelo ogul oser mashuch mutu. Says Rabbi Shimon Gamliel that when the tear is round, then it's also, but if it's a slit, then it's mutter, because I guess the point is that if they were extracting the heart via the slit, it would have been a round slit, not a straight slit. Amar Rav Yosef says, Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, halache Rav Shimon Gamliel. That the halache is like Rav Shimon Gamliel. Now, Tosfos is interesting. Tosfos over here, because, why is it interesting Tosfos? Because there's a concept that we see attributed to Rabbi Yochanan. We've seen it several times. That something like, Kol makom she'ez Rav Shimon Gamliel, v'mishna seina halacha k'ma also chutz mei arev v'tzidan v'raya achrona. I believe that's the saying. So I'm happy that it just went off the tip of my tongue, because I was trying to remember what the first example was. I remembered Tzaidan and I remembered Raya Achrona. I didn't remember Orid. I think it's Orid, Tzaidan, Raya Achrona. I don't really remember what those cases are, but I'll flip on them. And so there's an opinion of Rabbi Yochanan that whenever we have Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in the Mishnah, the halacha is always like him. So now we're saying that halacha is like him from the fact, so now Tosfos points out, from the fact that we're saying that the halacha is like him, means that we wouldn't assume that by default the halacha is like him. It must be that these Amoraim don't necessarily hold that way. Okay, so this concept of whenever we have Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in the Mishnah, we pass Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, is not global. It's not, across the board. So it's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. And if I remember correctly, we've even seen that one of his students actually didn't necessarily say this in his Ne'kedu, right? We also saw that there's another famous teaching by Rabbi Yochanan or opinion or whatever of Rabbi Yochanan, which is Halacha Kistam Mishnah. That's very famous. Also Rabbi Yochanan. And I think we've seen also a scenario where one of his students, I think it may have been Rav Chia bar Abba, I don't remember where in my mind, I feel like it's in Masechta Shabbos, but I could be wrong about that. I'd have to find that. I have to ask Claude to find me that Maramakim. But Akoponim. So interesting that these concepts which feel like they're kind of like accepted concepts, they're not necessarily, right? At the end of the day, it's an opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, so Tosfos points out that these Amoraim didn't necessarily agree with that, and therefore they were pointing out that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, because we don't necessarily assume that otherwise the halacha is always like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Side point, I think it was an interesting point. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Fragt Abai to Rav Yosef, Amar Abai halacha michlal de plige. Okay, so no, Rav Yosef, if you tell me that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, so are you telling me that the rabbis have a different opinion? What would that opinion be? Right? What does Rashi say? Rashi say, right? Mi baya kabarle mine mi pliga rabbanon ole ilo. Do the rabbis argue or not? So responds Rav Yosef, Amle ma nafkaloch mina. Rav Yosef says, who cares? I mean, I already told you that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So who cares if the rabbis argue? We don't pass like them anyways. So Abai responds, halach. So Amalei Gemara Zmartatei. What is learning just like singing a song? It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to mean anything per se. Rav Yosef, you're telling us that the halach is like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel for no reason, because nobody actually argues. Says Abai to Rav Yosef, you're telling us that the halacha is like Rav Shimon Gamliel. Mistama, it's important. It means something. Mistama, does this imply that the rabbis have an opinion? What is that opinion? Because if there is no opinion, then why do we need to know that the halacha is like Rav Shimon Gamliel? I mean, it's point. Of course, the halacha is Rav Shimon Gamliel. Nobody argues. Givaldig. Basur anichnas avodas k'chav mutter azoi. So the Mishnah had continued and said that if you intercept meat on its way in to Avodah Zarah, I guess there's an Avodah Zarah someplace, and they're bringing meat there for, I don't know why, but for some reason they're bringing meat to this Avodah. It's already slaughtered and everything is a hunk of meat. They bring it to the Getchke, and you intercept the meat on the way to be offered. So we said it's mutter because it wasn't actually used yet for Avodah Zarah. So man Tana, who's the Tana over here? Amar Rav Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, delay Rabbi Lazar. It is not like Rabbi Lazar, because if it was Rabbi Lazar, Omer stam machshavas abadis kechavim, avikchavim abadis kechavim. Because Rabbi Lazar says, there's a different case which says Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, we're just going to go with what it says here, Rabbi Lazar. And Rabbi Lazar says, no, because he quotes from a Mishnah in Chulin. Where was this from? This was from Chulin. So I had to look at the Mishnah, and there it just says Reish Aleph. So usually Reish Aleph is Rabbi Eliezer, but it doesn't say it explicitly. And here it says Rabbi Eliezer. All right, so I'll go with what it says. So Rabbi Eliezer says that anything that a Ovid Kochavim does, right? What do you say? It says Stam Machshavas Ovid Kochavim Avodas Kochavim, that the default intention of the Ovid Kochavim is for the Getchke, is for Avodah Zarah, and therefore we can assume that when he slaughtered the animal, according to that, it was for Avodah Zarah, in which case you bet the meat is aser. So if we're saying that by intercepting the meat on the way into the getchke, it's mutter, it must not be like Rabbi Lazar, because Rabbi Lazar would say it's aser. He did it for the intention. He slaughtered it with the intention of Avodah Zarah. So it's not like Rabbi Lazar. But I would say aser mipnei kizivche mesim. Let's talk a very interesting tosfos on this, but okay, we're not going to get into that. But if anybody's interested, tosfos on the right over there. Very shane of tosfos. And any meat on the way out from the Avodah Zarah is aser, because we're assuming that we're talking about in the Gemara, but we're assuming that the meat was brought into the Avodah Zarah. It was used for Avodah Zarah, so it's be'etzim zivchei meisim, and it's going to be aser. But no, my time how come he after deleket to kovas avodas kochavim, it was for sure offered, at least in some way, for Avodah Zarah. And money, whose opinion is this? Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseri. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseri is opinion the Tanya. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseri Omer says Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseri minayin the tikravis avodas kochavim shemitami be'oil. How do we know that the offering for Avodah Zarah, that an offering of Avodah Zarah is mitame be'oil? Shenema vayitzmedu levalpor vayochlu zivchei mesim. Well, it says in the pasuk that they basically got involved with Baal Peor, with Avodah Zarah, and they were making these sacrifices of the dead. So we're basically comparing the sacrifices to Avodah Zarah to mesim, and ma mesim mitame ba'oil, just like a mace, just like a corpse is mitame ba'oil. So therefore, also offerings to Avodah Zarah are also mitame ba'oil. And then as Rashi points out, umina, and further, just like mesim or aser ba'ano, just like a corpse is aser ba'ano, so too the offering of Avodah Zarah is aser ba'ano. It's going to be aser ba'ano. So there you have it. So since this meat that's on its way out from the Avodah Zarah, mistama, was offered to Avodah Zarah, and we compare offerings of Avodah Zarah to corpses, and corpses are mitame, and they're also aser ba'ano. So also this meat would be mitame, and also aser ba'hano. Omar Shmuel says, Shmuel oved kechavim. No, I skipped a line. Hahochen the tarfis asur losis moed. So a oved kechavim who's on his way to some kind of pagan festival, so you can't do business with him, you can't sell stuff to him, because when he gets there, what's he going to do? He's going to give shevach v'odaya to his Avodah Zarah when he gets to his pagan festival. Says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel, so Shmuel, oved kechavim ha'olech l'tarfis, and oved kechavim on his way to his festival, ba'alicha, also when he's on the way, when he's going to and fro, when he's going to the festival, so then it's also, don't do any business with him on the way. Ba'alicha also, the ozil umodi kame avodah kochavim, because he's going to get to the festival, and what's the first thing he's going to do? He's going to go to his getchus and say, I made a deal on the way, thank you so much, Hashem dank. B'chazore mutter, but when he's going fro, fro means on his way back, when he's going fro, so then mutter, and you can do business with him, because it's okay, the whole Avodah Zarah thing is over, it's behind him, whatever happened. On the way, he's going to go and give shevach v'odaya. Once he's back, do business with him, it's fine. But Yisroel ha'holech l'tarfis, however, the opposite is true for a Yid, who unfortunately is going to this festival. Ba'alicha mutter, when he's on his way to the festival, you can do business with him, because So, we're still holding out with the hope that he's not going to go. That he's not going to go. And we do business with him, hopefully he's not going to go. B'chazore osur. However, the yid, if he goes on his way back, osur, when he comes back, can't do business with him because came into ovigba, hadar ozil. That, he's so inspired. A yid goes to some kind of pagan festival. He shouldn't be going in the first place, but he goes. He knows he shouldn't be going, he goes. And it's a new experience for him. It's the coolest thing since sliced bread. And he comes back and he makes a business deal. And he goes right back to the festival. He goes right back to his getchke. And he says, thank you. It's only been, 1 hour. The same day I left from you. Look, I got this deal. It's going to go right back. So because this yid, on the way there, you could do business with him because hopefully he's not going to go. But once he comes back from there, don't do business with him, stay clear. But we have a braisa that says that by a yid, in both directions, you can't sell to him. Whether he's going to or whether he's going fro. Whether he's going to or fro. You can't, either way, you cannot do business with him. That's a braisa. Rav Ashi says, says Rav Ashi, unfortunately, that braisa is talking about a yid who is a mumar. A yid who, unfortunately, he does averis, and we assume that he is going to go to the festival, and in that case, we don't do business with him on the way to the festival, so that he shouldn't give shavach v'odaya to his getchke, and we don't do business on the way back because we don't want him going back afterwards, and that is that. The rabbis thought, so now this is an interesting scenario. And Oved Kocham was going to a fair. Now a fair is different than a festival. A festival, it's all about the getchkes. It's all about the Avodah Zarah. A fair, on the other hand, is it's a business thing, right? It's a fair. You go and you do business. So in Oved Kocham was going to a fair. That is that where you could do business with him in both directions. Bein ba'alicha, bein ba'chazore mutter. You could do business with the Oved Kocham, whether he's on his way to the fair, whether he's on his way back. It makes no difference because this isn't an Avodah Zarah expedition, an Avodah Zarah journey. It's business. So you could do business with them. However, a yid who goes to this fair, when he's on his way there, you could do business with him, but on his way back, don't do business with him because mishna Yisrael the b'chazara aser. How come by a yid when he's on his way back, you can't do any business with him? You can't sell him stuff. The amrei avodas kochavim zovin. Because we assume that what was he doing at this fair? He was selling getchkes. That's what the yid. What does a yid do at a pagan fair, a business expo? He sells getchkes. That's what he does. So the money that he's paying you is money that he received for selling getchkes. So but why? So then why don't we say the same thing by the Oved Kocham? No, why don't we say the same thing that the Oved Kocham also sold getchkes over there, and what he's gonna pay you when you on his way back is money that he received for selling getchkes. That should be a problem to do business with Oved Kocham. Oved Kocham amina glima zovin, chamer zovin, net. The Oved Kocham, what do we assume that we did at the fair? That he did at the fair? He sold clothing. He sold wine. He wasn't selling getchkes. He sold amor glima zovin, chamer zovin. So then why don't we say the same thing by the yid? He was selling clothing. He was selling wine. The answer is the answer is, look, the yid lives with us, other yidden. If he had clothing to sell, he would sell it to us. If he had wine to sell to us, why would he schlep all the way to the fair to sell things that he could sell to his community? We assume that the reason why a yid is going to the fair is so he could sell over there things that he can't sell over here. Like a getchke. So the pagan who goes over there, he's going there to do business with his friends. But we are the yid's friends. He should do business with us. So why is he going to go there? Mistama, because he's selling getchkis, and therefore, whatever money he's going to pay us for whatever we do afterwards when he comes back, he's going to be paying us money from getchkis, and that's a problem. Ve'aboyin mutarin. Okay, we said in the Mishnah that those on the way back, that the pagans on the way back from their festivals, we can do business with them. That's only when they're coming back one at a time we could do business with them. If they're coming back in groups, in packs, don't do business with them. Because in that scenario, we assume that the intention is that he's going, if you do business with him, he's going to return there and then give Shevach Vodai to his Getchkin. We don't want that. That was the Aflamed Beis. Masechta Avodah Zarah. We moved forward in our Mishnah. We explored, we had a long Mishnah, Daf Chav Tesamud Beis, with lots of different parts to explore, and we explored different parts. We explored the Hadrianic shards of wine. Very interesting. We explored the hides from animals that their hearts were ripped out, their beating hearts were ripped out of them. We explored meat on its way to and fro, on its way to Avodah Zarah and fro Avodah Zarah. We discussed pagans and Yidden on their way to festivals, fairs, from festivals. Well, that was the Lamed Aleph in Masechta Avodah Zarah. It was the Lamed Aleph or Lamed Beis. I can't remember. That was Lamed Beis of Masechta Avodah Zarah. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.